At 140 pounds, with size 7.5 feet, and eyesight so bad the US Army disqualified him from service, Bruce Lee should have been ordinary. Instead, he showed what a real-life superhuman was. He launched men across rooms from 1 inch away. He lifted his entire body weight on just 2 fingers. This isn't mythology or movie magic. It's documented evidence, and it raises an uncomfortable question. Was Bruce Lee simply elite or something beyond human? The superhuman strength. Bob Baker crossed his arms and told the crowd he'd seen every fake martial arts trick there was. At the Long Beach International Karate Championships, Baker had volunteered to expose what he assumed was another con artist pretending physics didn't apply. Bruce placed his fist against Baker's chest, with maybe an inch of space between his knuckles and the man's body. What happened next defied everything Baker thought he knew about force and motion. He flew backward like he'd been hit by a car, crashing into a chair that probably saved him from going through the wall. The crowd went silent. They'd just watched something impossible. Punches need distance to build power. Every boxer knows this. Every fighter knows this. Bruce had just proved them all wrong. Years later, Stanford biomechanics researcher Jessica Rose spent months analyzing the footage. Her calculations kept coming out impossible. Bruce had generated over 1,500 newtons of force from that single inch of movement. Enough power to crack ribs like breadsticks. The secret wasn't in his arm. The power started in his back foot, pressed against the floor like he was trying to push the earth itself. That force traveled up through his calf, twisted through his thigh, accelerated through his hip rotation, whipped through his core, channeled through his shoulder, and finally exploded out of his fist. Every muscle fired in perfect sequence, each one adding its power to the wave traveling up his body. The final snap of his wrist at impact multiplied everything, like cracking a whip. Bruce spent 15 years learning to fire every muscle in this exact sequence. Not approximately right, perfect to the millisecond. Traditional martial artists generate maybe 30% of their potential power because their muscle groups work against each other, canceling force instead of amplifying it. Since 1964, hundreds of martial artists have tried to replicate the 1-inch punch. They study the footage frame by frame. They practice the stance, the hip rotation, the weight transfer. Some manage to push people back a few feet. Nobody has matched the original. Bruce Lee could support his entire body weight on 2 fingers while having a philosophical conversation about Taoism. Not for a photo opportunity or a quick demonstration. He'd pump out 200 fingertip push-ups while explaining the difference between classical and modern training methods to whoever was watching. Each finger supported roughly 40 pounds of dynamic shifting weight with every rep. His breathing stayed normal. His voice never wavered. This was his warm-up. The journey to those iron fingers started with a bucket of sand in his backyard. Every morning at 5 a.m., Bruce would drive his fingertips into the sand 500 times. Not punches, but deliberate strikes designed to condition every part of his fingers. After 6 months, when sand felt like nothing, he switched to gravel. The sharp edges tore his skin daily. Blood mixed with stones. Most people would have permanent nerve damage. Bruce developed fingertips that could feel a pulse through clothing while being hard enough to shatter wood. The progression continued. After gravel came steel pellets, small ball bearings that rolled away from impact unless you hit perfectly straight. 500 strikes every morning before breakfast. His fingers transformed into something that didn't match any medical textbook. When doctors examined him, they found bone density that was literally off their measurement charts. His tendons had thickened like steel cables. The attachment points where muscles connected to bones had actually restructured themselves to handle forces that would tear normal tissue apart. In 1969, Bruce stood before a crowd holding an inch-thick oak board. No wind-up, no dramatic preparation. He simply placed his fingertips against the wood and drove them through like pushing through paper. The sound wasn't the crack everyone expected, but something closer to tearing fabric. The board split perfectly down the middle. Those watching assumed it was pre-cut or somehow weakened. Then Bruce let volunteers bring their own boards. Same result every time. The nunchaku mastery showed another side of his conditioning. Dan Inosanto brought Bruce the weapon in 1964, 2 sticks connected by a chain. Bruce laughed and called it a toy. The first time he tried to swing them, he cracked himself in the skull hard enough to draw blood. 3 months later, he was playing ping pong with them, never missing a return, discussing philosophy between volleys. But Bruce's most incredible conditioning feat might have been his sandbag training. He had a 300-pound heavy bag that most fighters couldn't even move with their strongest kicks. Bruce would launch it with a side kick, making it swing up parallel to the ground. The chain holding it would go completely slack from the force. Then he'd kick it again on the backswing, sending it flying in the opposite direction. He could keep this rhythm going for minutes, each kick delivered with the force of a car crash. His breathing controlled like he was taking a casual walk. William Bodine had directed over 300 films when he showed up to the Green Hornet set in 1966. He'd worked through the silent era, the talkies, and every advancement in film technology. Nothing prepared him for Bruce Lee throwing his first punch. The footage came back from the lab looking broken. Bruce appeared to stand perfectly still. Then suddenly the stuntman flew backward into a wall. No movement between those 2 points. The camera department spent hours checking equipment, thinking something had malfunctioned. The problem wasn't the cameras. Film ran at 24 frames per second, the same speed used since the 1920s. Bruce's punches were completing their entire arc in less than 1/24 of a second. He was literally moving between the frames, invisible to technology designed specifically to capture human movement. When they brought in specialized equipment to measure his actual speed, the numbers broke their understanding of what humans could do. One punch clocked at 0.05 of a second from start to impact. Your brain takes longer than that to process that you've seen something move. The producers faced a problem nobody had encountered before. They'd hired the most skilled martial artist in America, but audiences couldn't see what made him special. Television viewers would think the film was edited badly or that the stuntmen were taking dives. They had to ask Bruce to slow down, to deliberately move at half speed so the cameras could catch him. Every artificially slow punch went against 15 years of training designed to make him faster, more efficient, more invisible. Bruce found other ways to demonstrate this impossible speed. The coin trick became his favorite party demonstration. He'd place a dime in someone's open palm and stand 3 feet away. "Close your hand the instant you see me move," he'd say. The person would nod, confident. Bruce would twitch. They'd snap their hand shut, feeling the coin safe inside. Then they'd look down. The coin in their hand wasn't the dime Bruce had given them. It was a penny. The original dime was now in Bruce's hand. He'd crossed 3 feet, opened their hand, swapped the coins, and returned to his starting position faster than their brain could process movement had occurred. During one training session, Bruce told his student to block his punch. The student, an experienced fighter, watched carefully. Bruce threw what he called a light tap, barely any force behind it. The student ended up with a dislocated shoulder. Not from the impact, but from his own body's reaction, trying to block something moving too fast for his reflexes to properly respond to. His arm jerked so violently trying to intercept the invisible punch that it popped out of its socket. When Bruce finally made his own films, he solved the camera problem by shooting fight scenes at 32 frames per second, then playing them back at 24. This 8-frame difference made his movements visible while preserving their superhuman quality. That's why fight scenes in Enter the Dragon look different from every martial arts movie before it.
Bruce Lee kick, you don't shut your eyes, because when you shut your eyes, you cannot see Bruce Lee kick. You know how fast?
Bruce Lee was the fastest fists in martial arts history, with lightning kicks, 1-inch punches, and untouchable speed. Yet his own Sifu, the legendary Ip Man, claimed he could stop Bruce cold with nothing but a single finger. No blocks, no footwork, just one finger, and the dragon would freeze. Is it truly impossible, mere arrogance, or the deadliest secret of Wing Chun deliberately hidden for centuries? For years, this story was dismissed as myth until rare old training footage and eyewitness accounts from Ippy's closed-door classes surfaced. Was the wonders of Ip Man's one finger a fact or a myth? Watch on to find out. What really happened inside Ip Man's rooftop dojo? In 1954, Hong Kong, a young Bruce Lee, already notorious for crushing men in cha-cha contests and rooftop brawls, climbed 5 flights to a tiny Argyle Street rooftop dojo thick with incense, sweat, and tiger balm. 10 students stood silent around a wooden dummy while Ip Man, 61, 5 feet 4, 120 pounds, wire-rimmed glasses, plain white tang suit, sat sipping tea like a mild-mannered clerk. Bruce strutted forward, cracked his knuckles, and demanded to test the old master. Ip Man set down his cup, smiled like a tiger eyeing lunch, raised one finger, and whispered, "Come." No film, no photos, just 6 witnesses who, until their dying day, all told the same story. What if the greatest martial artist who ever lived was humbled in 30 seconds by a man who never even stood up? The first witness was Hawkins Chung, Bruce's childhood friend and classmate. In a 1998 Inside Kung Fu interview, Chung described the scene. Bruce rushed in with everything: boxing jabs, Wing Chun chains, even a low kick he learned from a Filipino.
And I want you to be my opponent. Wow. And I said, so kiddingly, I said, well, Bruce, who wins this fight?
The thing was, Bruce Lee wasn't even attacking to dominate. He was attacking to gather data. He was reading Chuck Norris's timing, trying to understand his rhythm, probing for openings. But the speed was real. The intent was real. And it didn't take long for Chuck Norris to realize that this was going to be a test of endurance, timing, and adaptability. But Chuck Norris didn't come to play either. And his moves, let's just say they would stun you to silence. Chuck Norris didn't earn his titles by backing down from speed. His strategy was to close the distance, limit Bruce Lee's mobility, and land powerful shots when Bruce Lee stepped in. And he delivered. He tightened his stance and began pressuring forward, cutting angles to force Bruce Lee into corners of the room. When Bruce Lee darted in with a fast strike, Chuck Norris countered with heavy reverse punches or low kicks aimed at halting Bruce Lee's movement. His style was built on precision and raw power, and when his shots connected with the air near Bruce, the sound was explosive. If even one of those punches had landed cleanly, it could have changed the entire fight. At several moments, Chuck Norris managed to narrow the gap, using his size advantage to force Bruce Lee to retreat. For a brief stretch, it looked like the tide might turn. Bruce Lee was evading, but Chuck Norris was closing in, step by step. By this time, their small audience could see each man was just holding on as a test of will. It was no longer about teaching each other their unique styles of fighting. But then came the moment that changed everything. Around the 10-minute mark, Chuck Norris began to feel it, the slow pull of muscle fatigue. His punches were still powerful, but they took more effort. His footwork remained sharp, but his recovery time grew a fraction longer. Bruce Lee, on the other hand, seemed almost untouched by the passing time. His breathing was steady, and his movement still remained explosive. Even his speed didn't drop. Instead, it increased, and that made all the difference. The thing is, Bruce Lee had conditioned himself for endurance-based combat. His entire philosophy was built on conserving energy, striking efficiently, and avoiding unnecessary tension. Chuck Norris's karate, on the other hand, though incredibly strong, demanded more muscular power, and power drains faster than fluidity. The match shifted decisively.